time!
If you grew up reading R.L. Stine, you, my friend, definitely are a person of culture. While there were many other horror flick writers growing up, Stine's work had the power to probe a child's imagination with his terror-laced imageries. Now, although he was a big hit in the literary world, it is worth noting that R.L. Stine's original series of Goosebump books, comprising 62 titles published from 1992 to 1997, has sold over 400 million copies globally, and is the second best-selling book series of all time, following only Harry Potter. The enduring popularity of these children's horror stories has led to various adaptations over the years, including a successful 90s anthology series, a movie franchise featuring Jack Black in 2010, alongside several video games. Recently, Disney has released the 2023 reboot of Goosebumps, which focuses on 5 teenagers in a small town who find themselves seemingly cursed after encountering mysterious magical items during a Halloween party at an apparently abandoned house. As the show progresses, we see them grappling with the supernatural consequences of their parents' hidden secrets as a chilling series. The TV show has made its debut with the release of its initial 5 episodes in a batch, with more to follow. Now, Goosebumps has a rich history for its on-screen adaptation in anthology format, but this recent Disney revival deviates from its anthological approach by following a more continuous storyline. In contrast to the lighter and more comical live-action movie adaptations from 2015 and 2018, the 2023 Goosebumps series takes its teen drama elements and scary moments much more seriously. While this new series remains faithful to R.L. Stine's source material, it most definitely captures the essence of 90s horror tales and channels more of a Stranger Things-style nostalgic thrill. For Goosebumps fanatics like us who fondly remember the 90s with memories of scholastic book fairs and biking to the local library, this series almost feels like nostalgia-ridden walk-in. Anyway, in this video we will exclusively focus on the horrors that lurk as the main source of fear within the series, so buckle up, because this is going to be one hell of a scary ride. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The Ghost of Harold Biddle. If you have binge-watched all the 5 episodes by now, you would know that this guy is the primary antagonist of the show, the main ghost terrorizing the town. The show starts out in 1993, where we first see Harold Biddle living alone in a creepy-looking house amidst the forest, spending most of his time in the basement, sketching away in a leather-bound scrapbook, collecting worms, you know, the usual stuff. Now, this is a high school kid who has seen to live alone, because as of now, the series has not yet revealed any parent or guardian in the picture. In the first 10 minutes of the series, we see Harold in his usual habitat, spending hours sketching up the basement, but all goes awry when he hears the doorbell ring, as when he opens the door, the doorway is empty, with not a single soul in sight. Of course, the doorbell rings for the second time. Harold goes out again and screams for the person to come out of hiding and show themselves. When he does get a response, Harold goes back into the house, but the door abruptly closes after him, followed by which the chandelier falls to the ground and the lights gradually flicker out in a rather classic horror trope move. He somehow manages to grab hold of a candle and light it. Harold's survival instincts kick in and he rushes back to the basement, but again the door closes behind him, locking him in. A mortified Harold screams to be left alone and in the process stumbles over the stairs, causing the candle to fall on the carpet and light a fire. Within a second, the entire basement goes up in flames, burning Harold to his demise, and the scene ends with a fiery ghost face emitting as flames. In 2023, we get to know that Harold Biddle's soul was entrapped in the same basement for 20 years, and when it is accidentally released by the new owner of the house, Biddle is out for blood. Harold chooses Allison to be his first victim, haunting her in the forest as she was trying to get back home from a busted Halloween party at the now abandoned Biddle house. He narrows down the children of his killers and haunts them through various mediums. Harold targets Isaiah during a very important football match, haunting him mid-game while he is due for a scholarship that could make his entire career. While everyone watching the game sees Isaiah freezing in, all Isaiah could see is a trope of flaming players running after him as he clings on to the ball. Ultimately, Isaiah breaks his arm watching the ghost of Harold Biddle burning up in flames, costing him an entire football season for good. Harold later takes possession of the meek English teacher Mr. Bratt and uses him as a conduit to settle his dues with his killers. Through Mr. Bratt's body, Harold functions in the outer world, keeping track of all the teenagers while sipping his usual chocolate milk with a bowl of worms for breakfast. Although the teenage angst in his spirit is quite hilarious, he does some serious damage around here. Harold gets a kick out of making his victims hallucinate his charred face, revealed after they watch him go up in flames as seen when Nora is admitted to a psychiatric ward. One thing to note here is that every haunted object in the series is intricately related to Harold's life, from the house to the worm keeping to his knack for photography and sketching. As a human, Harold was a lonely kid ridden with social anxiety. Although he was good friends with Margot's mom, Sarah, Harold still mostly kept to himself. So when Sarah and her bully friends played a prank on Harold that got way out of their hands, it is safe to say that his soul certainly was not resting in peace. The Haunted Biddle House. Well, the Biddle House is the main catalyst of the entire series. We first see the Biddle House when Ben, Isaiah's father, works on fixing dentures around the house, which is when Mr. Bratt first comes and takes a look around the house. Until now, the Biddle House had been abandoned for over 2 whole decades, after a teenage kid named Harold Biddle mysteriously died in 1993 after his basement caught fire. Apparently his parents went missing after their son burned to death, leaving the house without an owner until Mr. Bratt found out that he was the last living relative of the Biddles and hence came into the ownership of the Biddle House. Now, the Biddle House looked like one of those quaint cottage houses from the outside, while the interiors looked like a royal hunting lodge of sorts. With rustic hardwood floors and deer heads mounted on the walls, the house was more than majestic for Mr. Bratt, who would never even be able to dream of affording such a beautiful house in his school teacher's salary. So the entire haunting fiasco begins when the basement of the Biddle House just won't seem to open, and Mr. Bratt goes on to use a crowbar to try to break into the lock, but of course the door repels his efforts, and he only gets his hand brutally cut in the process, dripping blood all over the wooden floor and then rushing to the hospital with Ben to get stitches. Now, interestingly enough, the blood seems to come together and soak into the lock of the door, almost acting as a key that finally unlocked the basement. On Halloween night, when Allison threw her party at the Biddle House, the house used its antiques to wire in 5 teenagers that would forever alter the course of their lives. As Allison, Isaiah, James and Margot first arrive at the house, the lights flicker out. So Isaiah unlocks the basement to go down and find a fuse, but instead he finds a camera. But we will get behind that mystery later. On Mr. Bratt's first night inside the house, a black smoke engulfs him in and he gets possessed by Harold Biddle. Plus the house is where the mask, the clock, the worms and the scrapbook were found or stumbled upon by these teenagers. The house is also where we first see the ghost of Harold Biddle right at the forest, scaring the living shit out of Allison as she was trying to get back home from the busted party. Had Mr. Bratt never inhabited the house or the teens never went for their stupid party, leaving the house undisturbed, all of this fiasco would never have happened. But I guess we need all those to happen for the series to pan out just right, huh? The Haunted Camera. In the first episode of Goosebumps 2023 titled Say Cheese and Die, the story centers on Isaiah, the star quarterback. While exploring the basement of the abandoned Biddle House, he stumbles upon a vintage Polaroid camera. Driven by fascination, Isaiah takes the camera with him and uses it to first take a picture of his girlfriend Allison and then his childhood best friend Margot. Unaware of the history of the camera or who it belonged to, Isaiah keeps the camera with him, although he forgets it with his bag in the Biddle House when Mr. Bratt came in to bust the party. Now, this camera has a sinister ability as the photos it takes reveal a dreadful fate awaiting its subjects, but the catch is that only Isaiah can perceive these ominous images. When Bratt met Isaiah the next day at the school canteen to give him his bag, Isaiah found the camera along with the pictures he had taken of Allison and Margot. He was taken aback when he realized that the backdrop of the photographs differed from the ones he took at the house. Allison's face was her laying terrified in the forest upon seeing Biddle's ghost, while Margot's face seemed like she was choking. Now the real crazy shit happens when in the next scene, Margot is seen near the vending machine to get a chocolate bar and sees a mysterious figure lurking behind the shadows in the hallway. Yep, that was Biddle's ghost. Before Margot could figure out anything, the figure disappeared as soon as the bell rang and students crowded the hallway. Naturally, Margot picked up a chocolate bar from the machine and took a bite out of it. And instantly, her nut allergy kicked in, choking her. Luckily, Isaiah came to her rescue and shot her with an EpiPen, saving her life, only to realize that the sight of her choking bore an uncanny resemblance to the photograph he took. Slowly, everything started making sense to him, although he did think for a split second that he was losing his mind. When he tried to speak to James and Margot and convince them about his future predicting camera, both of them ridiculed him for showing nothing but a blank photo, assuring us that only Isaiah could see these pictures. This entire narrative bears resemblance to a famous Goosebumps episode featuring Ryan Gosling, but this 2023 adaptation introduces a significant twist in the storyline, as in this version, Isaiah becomes increasingly alarmed when he sees a photograph of himself with a broken arm. In an attempt to avert this ominous future, he decides to destroy the camera. However, his efforts take a new turn when he finds the camera again in his locker in between his important football match, plunging him into a deep horror and shock in the field. Everything blurs out for Isaiah as he sees his teammates turn into flaming ghosts chasing him across the field. As the photograph predicted, Isaiah ends up breaking his arm on the football field as the ghost of Harold Biddle, dressed up as a ghostly referee, blows the whistle while burning into flames. And the next we know, Isaiah ends up on a hospital bed. The Haunted Mosque. Now, for the ones who have seen the series until now, are aware that every supernatural object in the show usurps one of the teens by putting them in a manic influence that goes horribly south. In the second episode, titled The Haunted Mosque, we are introduced to Isabella, a reserved teenager with a surprising secret life as an online troll. She is in charge of the audiovisual room at school, making sure to document every match or every important event the school initiates. But still, Isabella feels invisible in the school. She has no friends and nobody even knows her name, let alone notices her. However, her story takes a darker and more supernatural tone when this updated Goosebumps reboot adapts R.L. Stine's novel, The Haunted Mosque. At the Halloween party, when Isabella feels out of place again, she runs away from the crowd and discovers a seemingly intriguing item in the basement, much like Isaiah in the previous episode. This object, in her case, is a mysterious white mask with an ominous secret. It almost feels like this plain old mask is calling out to Isabella, who is inherently drawn towards it. When she puts on the mask, it grants her the confidence to socialize and dance with her classmates at the party, almost as if her self-awareness was simply not an issue anymore. Isabella felt unstoppable in that mask, so of course she took it home along with her. Now, Isabella was a shy girl who mostly kept to herself, but the evil mask fed on her insecurities and provoked her to become the worst version of herself. At school, when a reckless Lucas Parker breaks her $3,000 drone, Isabella goes out of control at the guidance counselor's office and lashes out at him in a way that nobody has ever seen her behaving before. At home, when her mother grounds her for her broken drone, Isabella loses her shit. This is when the mask keeps convincing her to allow it to help her. All she has to do is put it on. So of course she puts it on, and the mask almost uses her rage as a fuel to make her go extreme lengths. As she submits to the mask's temptations, it takes full control of her, slowly turning her into a ghastly-looking troll who goes full rabid, attacking Lucas. Luckily, Isaiah and Margot get just on time to save him. When troll-faced Isabella gets home, she is still wreaking havoc by turning her house upside down. However, the mask's influence takes a more sinister turn as it compels Isabella to go to extreme lengths, nearly convincing her to harm her own little brother. When Isabella realizes the mask's hold over her, she almost peeled it open from her face and shoved it aside. Later, Isabella and her brother throw the mask into a lake and cast it aside for good, ridding the world of its malevolence. At least, that is what they thought, until a possessed Mr. Brat retrieved the mask and took it back with him to the Biddle house. The Cuckoo Clock. In the third episode of Goosebumps 2023, titled The Cuckoo Clock of Doom, the focus shifts to Isaiah's friend James, who becomes ensnared in a perplexing time loop triggered by his accidental collision with this eponymous timepiece when Isaiah spooks him at the Halloween party, causing him to trip. Now, this actually starts a series of unfortunate events nobody could have even comprehended. After hitting his head on the clock, James somehow gets attached to it. So every time he tries to leave the Biddle house, James finds himself again at the same place, getting hit by the clock in a similar manner while his friends ask him the same questions. When James realizes that he is stuck in a time loop which makes him go back to square one every time he tries to exit the house, he uses this opportunity to pursue his romantic interest, Sam, and ultimately win him over at the party. He keeps exiting the house and resetting the time loop till he manages to collect every information he needed to woo his crush and charm him. This time, when he tries to exit the house with Sam, James takes a chance to stop the clock for good, hence severing the endless time loop and putting an end to his menace. Naturally, James takes the hell off with Sam after this, and it felt like everything was a bad dream that finally came to an end. But of course, when is life so easy, right? So James, tinkering with time, has given rise to multiple malevolent clones of himself. Every time he exited the Biddle house, a new clone of him was formed, releasing a doppelganger, James, out in the world while he was stuck in the horrifying time loop, making him live the same mundane party over and over again. Well, these sinister duplicates eventually confine him within his family's abandoned mine, creating a dire predicament. Fortunately, Isabella stumbles upon the existence of these malevolent James clones and bashes one of them in the head, popping him like a water balloon and leaving behind a slime-like residue that apparently smelled like watermelon Jolly Ranchers. Now, these fake, slime-filled dupes James created were quite the menace. They ruined James's relationship with Sam, fought with Isaiah, and of course bunked school every day like a regular teen, while the real James was stuck at the mine, starving to death. Fortunately, Isabella joins forces with Isaiah and Margot to embark on a mission to locate and liberate their trapped friend. Slowly, they make their way to the mines and finally finish off all the fake Jameses, ultimately turning them into slime and saving the real James out of his peril. The Worm Monster. The show uses Harold Biddle's pet worms to loop Lucas Parker into the teen group, trying to figure out what is the supernatural entity that is haunting them. Initially perceived as little more than a reckless thrill-seeker, Lucas's behavior takes on a deeper significance as the story unfolds. On the first impression that Lucas is just a no-good teen who is trying to ace the entire YOLO situation by skating off from his balcony or consistently doing stuff that would get him into trouble, like taking down Isabella's expensive drone from the roof. It is a surprise that Lucas was not completely paralyzed or brain dead considering his daily adventures. But eventually it becomes evident that his daring stunts are not merely acts of thoughtlessness, but an endeavor to recreate the audacious adventures of his late father, seeking to connect with his memory. Lucas's quest to emulate his father reaches a surprising climax when, in a desperate effort to impress his crush Margot, he consumes a live worm. Although we do not see Margot going head over heels for a dude who ate a worm for her, we do get to know that Lucas actually found these worms at the Biddle house during the Halloween party and brought them back home to keep them inside a tank. Now, what unfolds later is absolutely gross. At night, when Lucas is asleep, all the worms from the tank stage a remarkable escape, working in unison to crawl out and slither all over him. These industrious worms find their way into his body through his mouth, nostrils, and ears, almost like how a parasite infestation attaches onto its host. In the morning, unaware of the overnight intrusion, Lucas leaves the harbor stop with his breakfast burrito. However, his initial excitement turns to revulsion when he takes a bite and hastily spits it out, as the once appetizing burrito now disgusts him. Driven by an inexplicable craving, Lucas heads to the compost bin and scoops up a handful of fresh dirt, devouring it with an almost primal hunger. Again at school, while navigating the stairway, Lucas becomes the accidental target of some boisterous boys horsing around. They inadvertently knock him down the stairs, but to Lucas's astonishment, astonishment, he rises from the fall without feeling any pain, which bewilders him. To further test this unusual development, he deliberately slams his fingers in his locker door, causing them to break. Yet, he experiences no pain. Even more astonishing, he witnesses his fingers rapidly healing before his eyes, while a possessed Mr. Bratt secretly observes these perplexing events from the window in his classroom door. Soon, Isaiah, Isabella, James and Margot put two and two together to figure out that these worms were simply another source of haunting from the Biddle house. Before they could speak to him about this predicament, the group finds Lucas rev up his dirt bike as he accelerates and daringly propels it off the roof, landing with an awkward crash onto the windshield of Margot's father Colin's car, causing it to crack. The landing, though far from graceful, results in Lucas dislocating his left shoulder, a fact that seems to elicit no visible concern from him. Margot, noticing Lucas's dislocated shoulder, asks him about it. To her amazement, Lucas casually slides it back into its socket, proudly declaring that he is invincible. However, beneath the surface, she can discern the unsettling sight of worms wriggling under his skin as his shoulder rapidly heals. Confident in his newfound powers, Lucas mentions that he has a death-defying date with the Dooms of Boom before speeding off. A worried Margot rushes to Nora, Lucas's mom, and seeks her help about the ongoing situation. They finally get to the area where Lucas's dad died while doing his last stunt, and Lucas was now there to do his death-defying stunt because he finally did not feel any fear. Nora rushes over to him, offering a heartfelt revelation that this particular stunt was one that his father knew he could not survive, and discloses the existence of a note left by his father. Nora apparently hid this from Lucas because she knew how much he idolized his dad. Overwhelmed by this revelation, Lucas breaks down into tears, and finally all the grief comes rushing back to him, making him feel a surge of emotions. The next we know, Lucas dismounts his bike and vomits up the worms out of his system. As Lucas and his mum share a heartfelt embrace, the ground begins to tremble, and they see that the worms have now congealed into a monstrous entity. Fearing for their safety, Lucas instructs his mum and Margot to flee, while he mounts his dirt bike to give chase to the terrifying worm creature. In a tense pursuit, Nora and Margot follow Lucas and the worm monster to a lumber mill on the coast. Inside the lumber mill, Lucas secures the door and urges Nora and Margot to ascend to the office and activate the wood chipper. The relentless worms eventually breach their barricade, prompting Lucas to navigate his bike around the catwalk, buying crucial time for Nora and Margot. In a heart-pounding climax, Lucas races towards the wood chipper, executing a daring leap from his bike at the last possible moment. The worms naturally follow his bike into the machine, meeting their gruesome fate as they are crushed into a gooey substance that spills out into the ocean on the other side. Harold Biddle's Haunted Scrapbook. As mentioned before, Harold Biddle's scrapbook was his entire artistic world. He spent hours sketching on it, often recreating pieces of his life on paper. In episode 5, titled Reader Beware, Margot receives a cursed item from the possessed Mr. Bratt, who believes it was finally time for the kids to know who their parents really are. The next morning at school, Bratt gives the scrapbook to Margot, saying that he found it in his basement and she should have it as her mum, Sarah, was in it. So Margot takes it and opens it as soon as Bratt leaves, and suddenly finds herself transported back to 1993, observing a scene between Harold and a young Sarah. She asks Harold if he is coming to the polo club, and he takes a picture of her with his Polaroid camera before following her. As this memory concludes, Margot returns back to the present, where the librarian notices her unease and inquires if she is okay. Margot, still reeling from her experience, finds out that the location of the darkroom in 1993 later became the AV Club. Inside the AV Club, Margot opens the scrapbook once more and witnesses another memory involving Harold showing her mum some photos he has developed. These pictures feature some of his favorite things, including the mysterious mask and his camera. Later, Sarah invites Harold to hang out with her friends over the weekend, and the memory concludes, shedding light on her mother's connection to Biddle. Outside of school, Margot meets up with her friends and reveals her startling discovery, and proceeds to guide them to the school theatre, which was the setting of the next memory. Although Isaiah expresses concern, warning Margot about the danger of reopening reading the book, Lucas encourages her, saying she should make her own choices. But Margot is resolute, explaining that this is their chance to finally uncover the truth, given her mother's unwillingness to talk. As she reopens the scrapbook, Margot alone is transported into a memory where Harold and Sarah engage in a conversation on the stage. Harold hints that someone is trying to harm him, although he cannot provide a clear explanation, and pleads with Sarah not to leave him when she mentions that Ben is waiting for her. As Sarah dashes out of the auditorium, Harold desperately implores Margot not to leave him either, his gaze locking onto her. Suddenly, Harold bursts into flames and urges her to come with him. Now, in the real world, Margot's eyes have turned solid black, and she appears unresponsive to her surroundings while the pages of the book shift to the Biddle house. Lucas, believing that the only way to snap Margot out of her trance is to take her to the Biddle house, suggests this to his friends. As they carry her unresponsive body to the house, Margot, still under the spell of the scrapbook, finds herself in the company of the burning ghost of Harold at the Biddle house. From her vantage point, she observes a group of teenagers ringing the doorbell, then hiding. When Harold answers the door, he does not see anyone outside. The teens repeat the prank, but this time they sneak in through the back door while Harold is inside. The ghost of Harold leads Margot inside. As the lights go out, he lights a candle and proceeds to the basement and locks the door as the teens reach it, banging on it, causing terror. Margot, now in Harold's perspective, plummets down the stairs, witnessing the candle setting fire to the rug and ultimately engulfing the basement in flames. Suddenly, the door opens and Isaiah rushes downstairs to rescue Margot. In the past, they both exit the house, while in the present, James, Isabella and Lucas remain outside. Following this event, Margot shares her unsettling revelation that there were other people inside the house with them during the past events. They witness the teenagers who tormented Harold running out of the back door. While Sarah insists on rescuing Harold, her boyfriend Ben stops her as fire engulfs the basement window, revealing a screaming ghost face within the flames. As these teens take off, leaving Harold for dead, the realization hits the group of friends in the present that their parents may be implicated in something much darker than they ever imagined. Everything becomes obvious when they realize that Biddle was getting back at them for what their parents did to him. The memories end with the teens riddled with endless questions, followed by a possessed brat inviting the troop inside the Biddle house to reveal the harrowing story behind the case. Slappy the Evil Dummy. The show skillfully concealed the object of Harold's obsession for a significant portion of its entire narrative. The mystery surrounding his fixation was a central element of the plot, leaving viewers in suspense, like when he first notices a plastic eye on Lucas and tries to get it from him. It was pretty evident that the eye was actually a part of a toy or model of sorts. Also, not to mention, he went to the psychiatric ward to haunt Nora and ask where is he. Now, of course, this he is never revealed in the 5 episodes, but even when Sarah and her friends leave the Biddle house after it catches fire, they are seen eloping with a huge wooden chest, which surely held something of great importance. However, the series eventually unveiled that Harold's relentless quest was to locate his old ventriloquist dummy, Slappy. It should be noted that Slappy the Dummy, inspired by character from the 1945 classic horror anthology film Dead of Night, is widely regarded as one of the most iconic figures in the Goosebump franchise. In earlier live-action adaptations, Slappy played the role of the antagonist, but with the first few episodes primarily focusing on Harold Biddle's menacing presence, the revelation of Slappy's connection to the story implies that he is poised to take on the role of the primary antagonist in the upcoming episodes of the series.
Invincible.
Wait, Lucas, what's under your skin?
Marvelous verdict. Well, these 5 episodes only feel like a warm-up to something even more horrifying, which we will probably witness in the upcoming seasons. I mean, the Goosebumps franchise has never really disappointed us in its decades-old run. So even if the series did start out quite lukewarm in terms of plot and horror, we can only hold out hope that the upcoming releases will completely knock us off our seats. Maybe we will see more of the parents in action, maybe even a little bloodshed, who knows? What do you think, guys? Let us know in the comment box below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.